My name is Juanita Kapp. You can reach me at meticulousmacarons@gmail.com or find me on LinkedIn. Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit the globe, I've had the wonderful privilege to meet a wide array of fantastic individuals. These individuals have truly touched my life in so many positive ways. Amongst this group of people, there are authors, public speakers, life coaches, poets, leaders, and visionaries. They are the unsung heroes of our time. Therefore, I decided to start this movement named Meticulous Moments out of a sense of my gratitude. It is my way of giving back to the community. Let us share and reshare their stories in an effort to build a beautiful society. With us this evening in our session is Oakland McCulloch. He is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, author, and accomplished speaker. Oakland has over 40 years of leadership experience, which includes 23 years as a combat officer in the United States Army. He published his first book, titled Your Leadership Legacy: Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be. Oakland has started talking on the speaking circuit. At this point in his life, his passion is to speak to as many people as he can about what good leadership, servant leadership, is about. He has given his speech at many universities, several companies, both in person as well as virtual, and will be a speaker at the Human Resource Conference in September, as well as a retreat in October. Oakland's contact details are listed here below. Feel free to reach out to him for further engagement and share his story. Over to you, Oak. Good evening, Oak. It's wonderful to be here with you, and thank you so much for agreeing to be here this evening to discuss your novel and your movement, what you've been busy with. I have to say today I had to Google the pronunciation of your surname. I had no idea how to pronounce that. I said McCulloch, and then Google told me it's McCulloch.
Yes.
In English. So please tell me, how do I pronounce it correctly?
That's it, McCulloch. That's right. And thanks for having me on the show, Juanita.
Thank you very much. It's such a privilege to spend time with you. And I have to say, since we connected, it has been evident that you are a very compassionate and kind leader, that your passion is to raise up good leaders. As your bio says, servant leadership, to instill that in the hearts of the people that you touch. So would you like to tell us this evening where your journey started? You're free to share anything that you would like to share.
Yeah, and call me Oak. That's what my friends call me. So I started in the Army right out of high school. I graduated from high school and I went to the United States Military Academy for a couple years, and then I came home and I finished up in ROTC. So I've been doing this leadership thing for about 40 years, one way or another, and most of it in the Army or the military related. But really, at this point in my life, it really is about getting out and talking to as many people as I can about leadership. And like you said, for me, it's about servant leadership. And we can talk about how that came about and why that's what stuck in my mind later if we want to, but that's really what it's about. And this whole journey of writing the book and doing the presentation and being on the speaking engagement circuit really started in 2006. I was the professor of military science at the University of South Alabama in Mobile. And so I was in charge of creating the next generation of lieutenants. And my program and the people who work for me, that was our job. And so part of that, I was going around, I had to recruit, and I was going around talking to high school students and college students. And I would always ask them, so what profession you want to be? What do you want to do in life? And inevitably, somebody would say to me, Colonel McCulloch, I want to be a leader. And I'd say, great. The world needs more leaders. I said, so what does that look like? What does it take to be a leader? And you get that deer in the headlights look. They had no idea what it took to be a leader. They just knew they wanted to be one, and probably for the wrong reasons. Probably because they wanted the title and they wanted more pay. And okay, we all get that generally as a leader. You get a title, you get more pay, you get to live in a nicer house, drive a nicer car. good for you. That's great. But if that's why you want to be the leader, then you need to go do something else, because you're never going to be a good one if that's the motivation behind being a leader. So I was going around talking to people about leadership, and then fast forward another 12 years and I'm here. And so I wrote I knew I wanted to get out on the speaking engagements and talk nationwide. And I knew if I didn't have a book that I couldn't do that, because we all know if you don't have a book, you're not an expert, right? And we know that's not true, but that is the way people look at it. Yeah. So I wrote the book, and since then I've been on a few speaking engagements. I've mostly colleges. I've been to Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. I've been to College of the Ozarks in Missouri. I've been to Doane University in Nebraska. I'm doing a couple businesses. I've done a couple businesses over, given my presentation over Zoom for them. And I'm going to be at an HR conference in September in Vermont. And in October, I'll be at a Warden's Correctional Convention in Pennsylvania. So I'm getting a few speaking engagements, and it's kind of moving in the right direction. And it's funny because I told my wife, I don't know, a few weeks ago, I said, it feels like it's moving in the right direction. It's not moving as fast as I would want it to. And she looked at me and she said, be careful what you ask for.
I tend to agree with her. I think you're going to get very busy.
Well, we'll see. Like I told her, I can always turn things down. But I mean, this really is my passion. This is what I want to do. I want to talk to as many people as I can, because we got to start doing a better job of producing the next generation of leaders, because I don't think we're doing a good job now.
I agree with you. Today I was driving and I was thinking of COVID-19, and I thought of the impact, that it had on leadership, being in isolation all of a sudden. And really, I saw during the COVID-19 time, especially the lockdown, that people just, they rose to the occasion. When the going got tough, there were people that just rose up as leaders that maybe didn't see themselves in that space.
Right.
And they only had themselves to turn to for a while before we all jumped online, before we had this interaction, which is fantastic because we are meeting people across the globe. But before, we weren't used to that. And I'm happy that we're going back to a hybrid sense. You've mentioned that you have been in person, you have given your presentation, but also virtual. But how do you think leadership, the COVID-19 has shaped leadership in essence, since everything went into the new normal?
Yeah. So I think it did have some impact. I don't think we'll ever go back to exactly the way it was. We'll always have now a hybrid thing where people have figured out that they don't have to get together, spend that huge cost to bring people together and put them in hotels for 3-4 days, give them meals and all those other things that you got to do at a live conference. Now, there's some that are going to do that, and I prefer those, obviously, because I feel that my message is better if it's in person. But having said that, I mean, I've done plenty of Zoom meetings and Zoom conferences and stuff like that. So I think that it is a challenge for leaders, and leaders got to understand that there's some things you got to do, even if it isn't a conference like this. I know some people are still working from home. And I had somebody that asked me the other day, so what can I do as a leader to kind of bring those people together, even though I've got people working at home still? And I said, it's tough, but here's what I would do. And here's what I think leaders have to understand. It's still about people. Leadership is about people, period. Bottom line, nothing else. It's about people. So you got to get people to understand that they're not out there by themselves, even if they're home working. They're still part of that community of your company, your organization, whatever it is that you're a part of. So what I tell them is, look, first of all, when you're doing Zoom meetings, Zoom conferences with your employees, number one, they got to have their cameras on, because they got to be able to see, and other people got to be able to see them to make them realize that they're not alone, that there's still people out there. There's still the people you knew. There's still people you got to interact with. And so I tell people, if you're holding a Zoom meeting or a conference and you're letting people have their camera off, you are wrong. And as a leader, that's part of what you got to make make understood is that when we do a Zoom meeting, everybody has their camera on and we're all interacting. And then I tell them, second of all, even if you got people working at home, you got to make an effort at least once a month or every couple months to have an in-person get together, so that people do still remember that, there is an office and there are people that are working there, and that we're still part of that organization. And because otherwise you just start feeling isolated and you just don't feel like you're part of the team. And that's a huge part of keeping people, is making sure that they understand, number one, that you're taking care of them, that you understand there's some issues and maybe they need to work at home, but that doesn't mean they can't come in one time every couple months. Even if you got to separate people across the room. I mean, I got it. Some people have to remain a little bit isolated, but they're going out to the grocery store. They're still doing stuff like that. So there's no reason they can't come at least once every couple months to the office and kind of reacquaint each other with everybody. So I think those are a couple big things that COVID has brought on, that I think is not going away. I don't think that we're ever going to get back to where everybody's in the office and where all the conferences are in person. I don't see that happening.
I tend to agree with you, Oak, because, I think it's good that we have this dynamic, that we can live in this hybrid space, to help people to not feel as isolated as they were during that first initial lockdown, but also to teach them to be present in the moment. Because I agree with you, when we do engage in Zooms, to have the camera on, because we have to make sure people are present in the moment, that they feel that connection. When we are in the same room with someone, we read their body language. And it's so difficult. I think there's a little bit of essence that we lost in the virtual space, but also then again, output, I think, has maxed now because of the fact that we can put in more hours. As you mentioned, we don't have to travel, so people are available 24/7. So how would you describe your view? What is your view of the impact of COVID on soft skills? Because I know there's a very, very high focus on hard skills in the virtual environment, but where would you place soft skills at the moment in our hybrid situation in leadership?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't know that I've ever been asked that question. So I think, again, leadership is, and I just had somebody tell me today, I was talking to somebody on a Zoom from across the country. And they said, leadership is so complex and it's so dynamic and so many things work together that you can't do one well and not another and expect it all to work. But here's what I would say is that, number one, it's not the leader's job to do all of it. The leader has to coordinate it all to make sure that it's all getting done, whether it's hard skills or soft skills, or whether you're doing it, or an employee who's in the office is doing it, or one that's in the home is doing it. But in the end, it is about you. It's about the leadership, making sure that things are getting done, which is hard when you don't have people in the office. Because, I mean, let's be honest, people can argue this all they want, but I'm here to tell you, I've seen enough people that not everybody is disciplined enough to do the same amount of work at home that they're going to do in the office. You can tell me that they are if you want, and I'm not buying it. I'm not believing it. I know that there are people who are not producing at home like they would in the office. Now, that's not everybody. I got it.
Yeah.
And as the leader, that's your job to figure out who those people are and to motivate them to do more. But I think the thing that leaders have to understand and remember is that no matter what's going on, no matter who's where, no matter what, it's your job to coordinate it and to understand that your name is on the blame line. If it doesn't work, if something's not working, it's your fault. And you got to figure it out and make it work. I always tell people, and I know people in South Africa may not understand because you guys play cricket, not baseball. But I always tell people here in America, leadership is not like baseball. It isn't 3 strikes and you're out. If something doesn't work, then you try something else. And when that doesn't work, you try something else. And you keep trying until you figure it out and it works. Because that's your job as the leader, is to make things happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, as leaders, we should also, the people that follow us, we should teach them that there is not only one solution to a problem.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, COVID made that clear in so many aspects. If like you said, if one thing doesn't work, you do something else.
Well, I always tell people this, because I hate micromanaging. I think micromanaging. Yeah. I think that's one of the worst mistakes that leaders, especially young leaders, make, is they get so wrapped up in, well, I'm in charge, and so I got to make all the decisions, and I got to do everything, and it's got to be done exactly the way I wanted it done. No, it doesn't. My whole point is, you tell somebody what you want, what you want it to look like at the end of the process, whatever it is you want the picture to look like. The job to look like, whatever. Yeah. And then you give them the resources, time, people, money, equipment, whatever it is that they're going to need to get that job done. And then you give them the authority to do it. So you give away some of that authority that as a micromanager you would retain. You're still not giving away responsibility. You can never give away responsibility. You are always responsible, but you give away some authority to make it happen. And I had a boss who retired, a 4-star general. And he said to me, Oak, leadership is on a scale. He says, on one scale, you got the micromanaging, authoritarian, horrible person to work for. Nobody wants to work for those people. I've worked for people like that, and they're horrible. And then on the other end of the scale, you've got the servant leader it's more like Attila the Hun, chaos, and he said, and you want to be as close to chaos as you feel comfortable being. He said, and the way you get there is that you give away authority. You give people authority to make decisions and to do things without having to come to you for every little input. Now, that doesn't mean you give away the project and you don't check on it. I got it. I mean, leaders have to still check, I call them in progress reviews, whatever you want to call them. But once a week or once every couple of weeks, I'd walk up and I'd say, hey, okay, Juanita, how you doing on this project? And so I'd get a feel whether or not you're doing okay. And if you need anything, then I can then either give you something more or whatever. But in the end, you got to let people do it the way they want to do it. And it was General Patton who said, never, ever tell somebody how to do something. Tell them what you want done and get out of their way, and they'll surprise you with their ingenuity, and they really will.
True, because innovative ideas come from people when they are given free reins. Yeah,
and if you're a micromanager, I promise you have killed all creativity, because they're going to sit there and wait. They're going to say, well, the boss is going to tell me how to do it, so why do I even have to think about it? I'll just sit here, and when he tells me what to do and how to do it, then I'll do it.
True, and they'll be stifled, in their growth. As leaders themselves, because they feel like you said, they're just going to be corrected, or they're just going to be told how to do something. And then I think sometimes fear sets in when micromanagement is there. I think it takes away that psychological safe space at work as well. Because when they have those feedback reporting meetings, they fear what the feedback they're going to get. What would your view be on that?
Yeah, well, here's what I tell people is that when you micromanage somebody, you cheat that person out of an experience. Not only do you cheat that person out of that experience, but now you cheat everybody who's going to work for that person out of that experience, because they can't pass it on. So you may be affecting your organization for the next 20, 30 years when you micromanage somebody. And I know it's hard. It's so easy. And I have to resist the urge. You give somebody a task and you see them really struggling, and you just want to walk up and say, get out of my way. I could do that in about 15 minutes. You're not helping anybody. You're not helping that person. You're not helping yourself, and you're not helping your organization if you do that. You got to really resist that urge to micromanage people.
True. So we delegate, and then we kind of guide. But we give them the framework of what the end result should be.
That's right. That's right. And I tell people I use what I call objectives and guideposts. So I'll tell you what I want it to look like. And then I'm going to give you some left and right limits, some guideposts. So you can use this much money, use these people, this equipment, this much time. Here's the authority, go make it happen. And if you do that, I think you'll be absolutely astonished at what they can do. Now, they're going to come back to you. Will they have done it exactly the way you would have done it? Probably not, but who cares? If they give you what you asked for, why do you care how they got there?
And their leadership journey has just, turned out for the better, because now they are able to, through their struggles, because I think sometimes, if they are at a place where they're still just new and fresh into leadership, there will be struggles. There will be a few speed bumps along the way. But
Absolutely.
to help them to learn how to problem solve is to give them the guidance and the framework and the free reins. So I agree with that. Yes. I wanted to ask you, if you think back, because you've been in leadership for 40 years, if you think back to your younger years, what type of leadership format or framework did you use, and how did it change to servant leadership? What was your initial approach?
Yeah, I think, I understood that servant leadership was the right answer. I didn't call it that. And the people who were my mentors in high school and college probably didn't call it that either. And I always give credit to two people outside my father and mother. My history teacher in high school, Mr. Schindler, and my basketball coach, Coach Niedzwicki, were the two people who really influenced me, and they were servant leaders. They understood it wasn't about them. It was about the organization. It was about people. It was about making everybody, like Coach Niedzwicki, it was about making everybody on the team better, not just to make the team better, but to make everybody, and not just a better basketball player, but a better person. And so I kind of got that. And I would say, I was always a transformational type of leader. That was if you want to talk theory, I hate theory, but if you want to talk leadership theory, I guess transformational leader was what I always, when I first started, I would have in the Army, because that's what they teach you, is the theory. And that's probably where I would have put myself when I was a lieutenant. And then I had two good bosses that really, really put it to me that it was about leadership and servant leadership. And one of them retired a 3-star general, and one of them retired a 4-star general. And I would have worked for any of them anytime. I'll give you an example. One of the guys, the guy who retired a 3-star general, he took over when I was a senior lieutenant and he was a major. He took over the S3 shop. And the day he took over, we were used to working, we'd be in the office till 6, 7 o'clock at night doing work. We were working, but it was, nothing that had to be done tomorrow, but we just got into the habit of being there all the time. So he walks in, and first day at 5 o'clock in the evening, he walks into my office and he says, "Lieutenant McCulloch, what are you doing?" And I told him I was writing an op order and whatever. And he said, "Is it due tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning?" I said, "No, sir." And he said, "Go home." He said, "I'll be here tomorrow." And I was like, wow. And when I was in S3, it's funny because when I was in S3, the same job he had when he was a major and I was a major, and I had lieutenants and sergeants working in my S3 shop. The first day I took over, I said, "Look, listen to me, and listen to me very carefully. Just because I'm in the office working does not mean you have to be here. If I need you to be here, I will tell you that I need you to be here. Otherwise, at 5 o'clock at night, go home." And so, those kinds of things are the ones that kind of drove home to me that it was about servant leadership, that it wasn't about me, it was about them. And I have to help make them a better person and a better leader.
Absolutely, because they are shaped. And the lessons that you learned when you were a young leader, you applied those when you were promoted later in life. So I agree completely with that. And I wanted to ask, the COVID-19, how do we as servant leaders instill the work-life balance for the people that are following us, because it's so difficult.
Yeah, I mean that's one that if you ask my wife, she'll probably tell you I never got down right. And that's a tough one, and I always kind of laugh when a 4-star general will get up on stage and say how you got to balance your work life with your family life, and I say, yeah, that's right. That's how you make 4-star general, right? Because we all know that's not true, and you got to do the best job you can. And what my philosophy and what I tell these lieutenants that we're commissioning, because I just got asked that like 3 weeks ago, I got asked that by a lieutenant. And what I told them was, look, there are times when you don't have a choice. I didn't see my daughter till she was 5 months old. I was in the first Gulf War for, her first 5 months of her life. Didn't have a choice. And in that time, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have all this stuff that I could see her. So I didn't see her till she was 5 months old. So, there are times when you don't have a choice. You have to be at work. You have to, no matter what your profession, there are still going to probably be times when you must be at work and you got to get a deadline. You got to get something done. Yeah. Do those. But then there are times when you can make an effort to get out of the office early, maybe. Just tell people up front, look, I'm gonna leave 15 minutes early today. I got my son's got a baseball game, or my daughter's got a volleyball game, or whatever. You can't make a habit out of that. But here's the part that leaders who aren't really leaders, they're bosses. This is what they forget. If you're going to do that, if you're going to leave 15 minutes early to go to your son's baseball game or your daughter's volleyball game, then you must make that available to the people who work for you as well. Again, there are times when that's not an option, and no matter what's going on, they got to be at work. In the military, we had this thing about parts, and if a vehicle wasn't working because it didn't have a part was broken, when that part came in, we stayed until that part was on and that vehicle was running. And I don't care if that was till 2:00 in the morning. We were there doing what had to be done. Now, the difference between a boss and a leader, I told them, okay, you worked about 6 hours later, don't come in till noon tomorrow.
Good.
So, you got to understand that it isn't just about you. You got to give people the same. If you want to have a balanced work life and home life, then you got to allow that to happen to the people who work for you as well.
I agree. In essence, I think servant leadership calls for the building of relationships.
Oh, again, leadership is about people. Servant leadership is certainly about people. But I don't care what leadership style you decide to use. It is about people. And chapter 2 of my book, and in my presentation that I give, one of the things I say is leadership is not about you, and it is all about you. And it's not about you. And like we said earlier, it's not about you getting a fancy title and more pay and living in a nicer house and driving a nicer car. It's not what it's about. It's all about you and how you treat the people who work for you and run the organization that you are in charge of, because it is a privilege. Being a leader is a privilege. And if you don't believe that, then you need to go do something else, because it is a privilege, because you have an impact on people's lives every single day. Or you could have an impact. You may not, but you could. Every single day, you could have an impact on people's lives. So it is a privilege that you get the opportunity to lead people, and you ought to treat it that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And being a leader is giving of oneself, really giving of oneself. And, I think servant leadership to me is taking ownership of that role, and taking it serious that you are now in charge of the shaping of individuals. And as you mentioned earlier, not only professionally, but personally as well in their development. So how would you view that personal and professional development in the sense of leadership?
So what I tell young leaders, and I got a little card I hand out to young leaders, and it says advice to young leaders, and there's 10 things on there. And one of the things on there, which I think is one of the most important things, and somebody asked me, I don't know, at one of the colleges I was talking to during the question period, they asked me the question, what's the number one advice you would give a young leader? And I would give it to any leader, but certainly young leaders. And I said, get to know the people who work for you. Mm-hmm. So every single day, go find one person in your organization and find something out about them, not about work. Don't talk about work, talk about their home life. Figure out, learn what their wife's name or their husband's name is, or their kids' names, what sports they play in, and what hobby that person has. And get to know a person. Now, you still got to have that boss-work relationship. I got it. Yes. But you can do this. I've had bosses do it for me, and I do it all the time. Get to know at least one person every day. Go find something new out about them, and then use that later on down the road. Not because you're trying to impress the person, but because you want them to trust you. Because trust is so important. And the only way you're going to build trust is to build a relationship. Vince Lombardi, again, American football, because you guys play soccer, but American football coach, famous American football coach here in America, he said one time, he said, a team is not a group of people who play together. A team is a group of people who trust each other. And I believe that 100%.
Absolutely. And, we were speaking about team, and I'm thinking that it's been my experience that in leadership, if you really connect with people and build that relationship, like we mentioned earlier, it goes past networking. But if they feel like they matter and they know what the vision is, it's it stands out that they give their best. Yeah. And they tend to go the extra mile and put in that extra effort because they feel that what they are doing they are being validated, but in a good sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Being acknowledged. Yes, yeah, yes.
I agree. I always tell people, because every once in a while somebody will ask me, come take a look at their organization, and for the day because they're having problems or whatever. And I always tell the person that invited me, I said, look, when I come to your organization, I ask the lowest level person in your organization what the vision of this organization is and where do they fit in that vision. Wow. If they can't answer that question, you got a problem.
Yes.
Because everybody needs to feel that way. Everybody needs to understand. And because it all goes back, a leader's job, the two main jobs of a leader, in my opinion, number one is to build the culture of that organization, which doesn't just happen. You have to build it. And then number two is to come up with a vision and a plan of where you want to get that organization a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And then you got to communicate that with the people who work for you, because they're the ones who are going to get you there. It's not you. You're not going to move that organization from where it is today to where you want it 5 years from now. It's going to be the people who work for you.
Absolutely. And making everyone in the team feel important, because everyone plays their own individual role. I agree with you, and they are all important in the great scheme of things. So I always, when I do leadership training, I teach the people that I train that you should always treat your teammates with dignity. Even if it's a person in the shop that cleans the floors, stop and thank them and say, thank you. You are giving us clean floors. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't want to shop here. So that's that right. Person is just as important as the manager. Yep. So I think team building is of essence. And what would your view be? I've heard that there are virtual team building sessions. Do you think those are still effective in the new normal situation that we are in?
So I think if that's what you have to do, then I think that's okay. But again, I'm a firm believer that if you can, you do things in person. And I think that staying with that theme of, you got to treat everybody with respect and everybody's got to feel like they're a part of the team. I think that's just a huge part of what the leader does and building that culture. And if you build the right culture, which in my opinion is based on values, whatever your values, whatever, you got to figure out the values you want it to be based on. And then you got to train people, and it takes training and money and time and effort. And I actually had a young leader He's about 30 years old, so about half my age. And and I told him that one day, and he said, Colonel McCulloch, you're wrong. And I said, what do you mean I'm wrong? He said, I don't have to invest anything. I just got to hire the right people. And I said, good luck with that, young man. Tell me how that works. Okay. Now, you do have to hire the right people.
Yes.
I got that. And I always tell people you hire for attitude, not for skills. You can teach people skills. It's hard to teach people attitude. So anytime I've been in charge and had the ability to hire and fire people, I always try to hire for attitude, the people with the right attitude. Then I can shape them however I want. But I can teach somebody any skill I want to teach them. It's just hard to teach them an attitude. So to me, it comes down to that. You got to build the right culture so that everybody understands, not that they feel like they're important, but they understand they are important in that organization. Like you said, it's the person who cleans the floor is just as important as the president of the corporation is. You all have a part, and you all got to do that part.
I agree. If we think of servant leadership, what does integrity in servant leadership look like?
Always doing the right thing, no matter what. And even if it isn't in your best interest, and there will be times if you're a leader that you got to make a decision that is not in your best interest, but it's in the best interest of the people in your organization, or it's in the best interest of the organization. And then you have to do the right thing, not because somebody's going to check up on it or somebody's going to be watching what you're doing. They are going to check up on it, and they are watching what you're doing. Let's not get that wrong. But that's not why you do it. You do it because it's the right thing, and leaders do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
So the motivation is inherently they want to make a positive difference. It's not about just looking good in front of people. It's about really making that positive, long-lasting change.
That's right. I agree 100%.
I'm wondering, Oak, how long did it take you to write your novel?
So that's an interesting thing. So I've been given this leadership presentation since 2006. So a bunch of it was already in my head, and I've given it so many times I could probably give it my sleep. And if you ask my wife, I'd probably have a few times. But my wife and I and her mom and somebody else who lives in the condo here, we went to a motivational / Catholic church speaker, and a great speaker, Jonathan Fanning, great speaker that, if you ever get a chance to listen to anything he does, it's absolutely worth the effort. And he gave a 3-hour presentation. Now, he didn't talk the entire 3 hours. There was music and there was breaks and all kinds of other things. But he was such a motivating speaker. And during the breaks, I'd go up and talk to him and kind of bounce some ideas off of him and throw some things. And I said, and I'm thinking about writing a book. He said, stop thinking.
Wow.
He said, write it. I said, okay. So I went home that night and I wrote out my table of contents. That was on the 15th of February. I started writing it on the 16th of February, 2020. And I published it on the 12th of February, 2021.
Wow.
So just under a year to write the book. Now, again, before we get what an amazing job. Most of those words were in my head already because I've been given that presentation, and that book is based on that presentation. And I got another presentation that I give on called The Secrets of Success. And I want to eventually put that into a book as well. I just haven't had time yet to do that. But that's one of my next things on my list is to start writing that book. And I guess I just got to wait for somebody to tell me to stop thinking about it and just do it. But so that it's those little motivating things like that get you started. And it's funny because I was talking to a lady right before this, and she's thinking about writing a book, and I told her the same thing. And she said, so how many hours a day did you spend writing a book? I said, that's the wrong answer. I said, if you're like most people, you can't, I can't just, because I tried, on a Saturday, I didn't have anything planned. I said, well, I'm just going to sit down at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to write all day. And I'd sit down at 8 o'clock in the morning. I was sitting there, nothing's coming. then I'd wake up at 2:00 in the morning, and things were just flowing in my mind. I'd get up and I'd write till 5, 6, 7, 8:00 in the morning. So for me, it was whenever it hit me that it was, but because to me, I can't force myself to write. It's either I'm either motivated to do it or I'm not.
Absolutely. I agree with you. That happens. We have a plan and then we're like, but we have the time now, but nothing happens.
Yeah.
And then you get those moments where you just, inspired, and there you go. So I guess it would be a good time to tell you today, maybe you should stop thinking about writing your second book and you should write it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it may have to wait a little bit, but yeah, I gotta make it an effort and make it a priority and figure out. And, and lots of times what I tell people is, just write things on a calendar. So, if you really can't do it right now, and this is probably one of my busiest times for both my day job of recruiting for Army ROTC and trying to get out on the speaking engagements, whatever, then, let's say 1st of September, write it on the calendar, write the table of contents, and then just do it, because I'm a firm believer that you gotta write things down. If you don't write things down, then it's just an idea. And that's one of the things I talk about with goals. It's not a goal if you don't write it down. It's just an idea. To be a goal, you got to do 3 things. You got to write it down. Mm-hmm. You got to do something within the first 24 hours to get started to accomplish that goal. And then number 3, you got to commit to accomplishing that goal. And if you do those 3 things, then you can accomplish just about anything. Fantastic. So it's setting short-term goals, in essence, to reach that long-term goal that you want to reach. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You need, I tell people, if you're just writing down the end result, you're going to get frustrated and you're going to give up. Yes. Have little baby steps in there. And that's how you improve an organization as well. You make things, you give them jobs and tasks that they can accomplish. And now they get their confidence builds. Every time they accomplish something, you need to make a big deal out of it, and their confidence will grow. And then now you can make the next bigger step, then the next bigger step. And the same thing with goals. You have little baby steps, little baby goals in there that are working you toward the end one. And every time you reach one, take the time to celebrate it. It's a big deal. Those victories. Celebrate those victories. Take the time. I agree. I think that's a valuable lesson that we're learning today, that, reaching those short-term goals is huge, because it's part of your development and gets you to the end result, like you mentioned. Now, I'm wondering, Oak, how many times did the title of your book change? Because I remember when I did my thesis, my title changed still right before I handed it in. So did you have the same experience, or were you sure of your title since the beginning? No, it changed one time. Only once. Good. Yeah. It was when I first wrote it, it was what it takes to be a good leader. And then between the publisher, me and my wife, we said, yeah, that's not a good title. So then we came up with your leadership legacy, becoming the leader you were meant to be. And that just worked. I think probably took us about 3 weeks to figure out what it was going to be, but we knew it couldn't be what I originally put it down as. So, but yeah, I only changed it once. I know there are lots of people who change 3, 4, 5 times, but yes, and the initial title is some way never the title that we end up with. So I was just wondering how many times it changed. Yeah, it's wonderful to have spent this time with you. You are such an inspiration. You're a very good example of servant leadership, and I believe that the community and our society need good, strong leaders, especially in the times that we are in. We see anxiety on the rise. We see depression on the rise. We see people needing to look after their mental health in a better manner. People are still adjusting to the hybrid way of living. Not all people are technologically in that space where they have adapted. And I think when we look at
the new authors like yourself and the life coaches and the people that the public speaking that is really being put out there. It's really fulfilling that need of people that want that sense of direction. So thank you so much, Oak, for your time. It's wonderful to have you with us this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll do so again in future.
Oh, you just gotta tell me when. That's it.
Absolutely. I enjoyed chatting with you so much. I think we'll do it soon.
Thanks.
Thank you. For everyone that watched this evening, thank you so much for joining us. We will be posting Oak's contact details at the end of this recording. And please be sure to contact him if you have any speaking engagements. Connect with him, network with him, and let's get his book out there to make a positive difference in our society. Thank you so much, Oak.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Juanita.